Hello and welcome to Eternal Durdles. I am your host, Zach Clark, and with me as always, Phil Blackman. Phil, how's it going, man?
Yo, what's good, dude?
Man, hell of an episode last time. We had a lot to go over. Slightly less this time. This will finally finish up all of our predictions and pointed out cards for Modern Horizons 2. I'm excited I would say I'm excited to be finished. I'm excited to conclude it.
I mean, I'm pretty sure we already have. We're already proven right on Ragavan, right?
It seems like it. It seems like
that seems like a done deal. I feel like once people start adopting gut shots and moving towards things like Squadron Hawk Solitude decks, to deal with the monkey for no mana, even if the monkey becomes not a problem, it's because the format warped to make it so.
Yeah.
So we're gonna already check that one off as correct. Not even a week later, because it has been showing up and prepare to slip on some banana peels.
Yeah.
Moderation is an enchantment for 1 blue-white, and it says you can only cast 1 spell per turn, and whenever you cast a spell, draw a card.
So I'm very confused why you want to bring this card up. So I'm interested to hear what you have to say about this card.
So this card strikes me as something it's very standstillian.
Okay.
So the reward is potentially powerful enough to build your deck in such a way to pay it off. So the same way that if you're playing Standstill now, you're playing Shark Typhoon, right? That was the big get for that deck. But before, you were playing things like Aether Vial or Manlands or something in the world that lets you pay it off. Myth Unrealized or something, Myth Realized, whatever that card was. You're doing things to work around the fact that a 2-mana draw 3 is very good. I think Moderation is in a similar space. Now, 3 mana is a lot.
3 mana is a lot, and this is an asymmetrical effect that punishes you.
It punishes you to a degree, but like the idea of tacking draw a card onto every spell you cast for the rest of the game, and it says you can only cast 1 spell a turn. So the trick is becoming, how do you balance your deck in such a way where you can also always cast a spell on your opponent's turn?
Yeah.
And that the format is already set up to do things like that, right? Between Force of Will, Force of Negation, all of your instants that you're already happy to cast at instant speed, between removal spells, Brainstorm. You have a lot of tools that you're already interested in doing this space anyway. So think about, like, if you stick a Moderation, right, and have a Force of Will in hand, knowing that your Force is going to recoup a card, and you can, when fighting over whatever they do, it makes that stuff really powerful. The idea of tacking draw card is onto every spell you cast for the rest of the game, that is going to be game breaking for a lot of decks that can't close the door on you quickly or punish you for only being able to cast 1 spell a turn. So yes, you're never going to win Counter Wars if it goes beyond 1 spell, right? You can't play Snapcaster Mage in your deck, but you can also potentially play cards that can even the symmetry. You can play things like Aether's One Canonist if you want to, like there is a world where you can work in your deck building constraints to make this card paid off. And if we've learned anything from Fire Design, it's that them adding draw a card onto just any effect is good. Just draw a card on anything means that it doesn't matter. You can just always be trading resources, and then you're going to end up with a full grip in hand. And it doesn't care what kind of spell you cast. So you don't have any restrictions on the type of cards you can play, just on when you can play them.
So assuming this becomes a main deck spell for this deck, this mythical deck that exists to play it, what I want to see out of the sideboard is donates to play against Storm.
That's actually interesting tech. You're never going to resolve 2-3 mana spells against Storm.
This is probably true.
Yeah.
And you're obviously not going to resolve Moderation and then follow it up on the same turn with donate, so there's that too. But I mean, it would be funny to do it.
The same way that you have effects that you'd want to play under a standstill, like it feels like to me now that you have like Rashad and Dockhand, you'd want to put that in a standstill deck. Like that seems reasonable. I think Moderation is just in the same space, and people just need to think about, how do I best leverage being able to cast a spell both on my turn and my opponent's turn every turn cycle? And I feel like it's not that hard, because you can have this be anywhere on your curve, whether you want to play big or play small, because you can also, cast the Flash Evoke creatures that are 0 mana. You still cast that spell when you evoke it.
Yeah.
That still draws a card. Like, that type of shit is really powerful. And you can pitch multiple Moderations to like Solitude or whatever, and it's still going to be fine. Also, this stacks very well. Like I know it's called
It's
moderation,
true. It's
but if
true.
you have multiple,
Yeah.
like
You just
after
draw
your
2
first
cards.
one, your second one is just 3 mana cycle. And then every spell after that is just divination on top of every spell you cast. And that just is going to bury your opponent really quickly if you are set up to make trades. Like I don't see a world where this is in a deck that's doing anything other than wanting to trade resources, and a lot of resources, right? You want everything to be on a 1-for-1 exchange because this is just going to break that symmetry in a really substantial way. So
and now, what do you think about like this deck with stuff like Shark Torn Typhoon, or and stuff like that? Like that still is fine to play, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can play it in that. The thing is, if you want to pay it off, like that's not casting a spell. So if you wanted to two spell, if you will, you can cycle plus do that thing. I think like
you can play the Creative Justice.
Ideally,
like
you want to just
standstill decks.
Yeah, you want to be setting this up where I imagine you want to be casting cheap spells every turn. Like I don't know, like being able to go like you're in blue-white, so obviously the first thing I go to is like Mishra's Bauble Predict, right? And it's like, all right, well, I can go Mishra's Bauble on my turn and then Predict on your turn, and then like also be able a bunch of cards. Now that's just an example of like things that you can pair together where you're playing on both you and your opponent's turn. I feel like I'm explaining this in such a way where I'm like trying to convince people that it's good to play spells on both you and your opponent's turn. Like the card, I feel like the drawback is I can never win Counter Wars. But at the same time, you have spells that could help you win Counter Wars on one card alone, like Flusterstorm anyway.
Yeah.
So
you could play Counterflux.
You could play Counterflux. You could splash 3 colors in a deck like this for sure.
Yeah.
And just be super clean on your mana. And instead of playing, I don't know, like the planeswalkers that may or may not be good in certain matchups, you can be like, I'm just gonna have this really good draw engine. I have to take a turn off of casting it, but like a turn off to cast it. But if you have a follow-up right afterwards, it's just going to bury your opponent going long, you know?
So this is, so in your regard, this is basically Phyrexian Arena, but in blue and white.
This is a card that will not be just tossed into decks the way that you can any of the War of the Spark Planeswalkers. Mm-hmm. Right? It's like, oh, I'm in these colors. These cards do generically powerful and asymmetric things. I can just put them in my deck and it costs me nothing other than casting it. This one has to be in a deck that is built to supply it. So the same way that you're not playing Standstill in every deck, you're building your deck to abuse Standstill. It's going to be the same thing. But I think it does something like Standstill in a way where it doesn't force you into a subsection of cards the way Standstill does. You can still play whatever you want. The only cards that I have found that I'm like, oh, I can't play with that anymore if I have moderation in my deck, is specifically Snapcaster Mage.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's come up to the next card, and that is Thought Monitor. There we go. Get this thing started, right? All right. Thought Monitor is a 7 mana that's 6 colorless and 1 blue artifact creature construct. It's a 2/2. It has affinity for artifacts. And it's flying, and when it enters the battlefield, draw 2 cards. So you've got a divination on a 2/2 flyer.
This is the Mole Drifter of Thought Casts.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
It's just Mole Drifter tacked onto a Thought Cast.
Yeah, I think the body is obviously relevant. You know, it could block a Delver, which is fine. The question is what deck wants this? What legacy deck wants this?
I think there are a lot of unexplored decks that are going to be able to abuse Brainstone in ways that nobody has considered even exploring yet, because the shiny objects are Ragavan and Urza Saga and the Evoke creatures. Yeah. And subtly, Brainstorm being on a permanent card that is specifically an artifact and makes all of those synergies matter is just like, well, there's probably a lot of homes that are like not Chalice artifact-based decks that can abuse Mox Opal that are very happy to have cards like this that are just value cards, and you can fix your deck by playing a bunch of artifacts. Now you're going to lose to shit like No Rod probably, but
I mean, this doesn't get bonked by No Rod. You're still going to get attacked. Like, I think some of those decks can just swing through, play the Midnight style, Midnight Ornithopter, Thought Monitor, like you could go like that affinity style deck, and if there's enough payoff like cards like this, it might be good enough.
I also think that we can be in a world where like affinity isn't just blitz deck. It's not like dump your hand and hope it's good enough, put all this shit on a Ravager.
Yeah.
Like we're getting Portable Hole in the next set, right? We already know about that one. That's just a good removal spell on a 1-mana artifact. We already have shit like Baleful Strix. You have Engineered Explosives. You have Emery that's like very good in a recursion going long game that also benefits from shit like Brainstone. So there is a lot of action going on in like the control-y sort of artifact style cards that we're getting. I don't know if you'd want this in that type of deck, but it is a 3-for-1, right? If this trades with anything on the table, it's a 3-for-1.
Yeah, it blocks. Like sometimes that's just good enough. Block a thing, and get 2 cards. I don't think that's the worst. Like if this trades with Delver Secrets, you're probably doing okay.
The same way that Of One Mind is good because it draws 2 cards for blue. I feel like this is in a similar space. Now, this obviously needs way more action. You need 6 artifacts on your board to make it so.
Yeah.
But between your artifact synergies of Portable Hole, Baleful Strix, Thopter Sword, Emery,
let's not forget artifact lands.
Explosions,
and we've got some
lands
new ones.
If you want them, I think there's enough action going on. I don't know if you'd want this card in those types of decks, but those types of decks I think are worth exploring and just haven't yet because people are like, oh, Blue-Red Delver just got a bunch of significant upgrades, and it's already the best deck in 40% of the meta share, right?
Yeah. All right, so let's go up to the next card, which will be Sythis, Hand of the Harvest. Harvest's Hand. Same difference. All right, so this is a green-white legendary creature, nymph, 4 green-white. And then it says, whenever you cast an enchantment spell, gain a life and draw a card.
So my question is, does Enchantress want copies of Enchantress 9 through 12? Because this doesn't trigger on itself, right? And neither does the original Enchantress. And you're already in those colors anyway, and tacking on a life to every single enchantment you cast, I feel like is a big deal for just showing up your aggro matchups. Now, I don't know if you care about aggro matchups because you have shit like Elephant Grass, but if you can just offset it by having essentially 8 turn 2 Enchantresses. Now, obviously, the original Enchantress is better because it has Shroud, so you know you're going to untap with it. But this isn't the worst, right? Like, I'm not an Enchantress player, so I don't know if you want that that many of that effect. But
here's the thing: I don't think you necessarily want that, but like, it's tough, right? Like, so there's going to be times when this is better than
Presence.
It's tough. No, I'm thinking of the Shroud one, Argothian Enchantress. But at the same time, like your opponent can't like Searing Blade. The times you're going to want this card is when your opponent is playing burn or like some way with a lot of creature removal. Probably burn because they're going to do more damage to you.
So that makes me think, yeah, I don't think this is going to replace the OG Enchantress, but because that's a Green Sun Zenith deck specifically for the Enchantress, you could easily just play this as a 5th and have access to a massive amount of life gain when you have something like Serra Sanctum to start spewing.
Yeah.
Right? Like I mean, this is obviously a modern plant, right? Like they didn't put the original Enchantress in
I think like honestly, looking at this and thinking about the deck and what the deck plays, like you just rather play Solitude. Solitary Confinement. Like that solves the life gain problem immediately.
I'm looking for the card. I can't see it right now. Just remind me, is this off of ETB or cast?
This is cast. This is a cast.
Okay, yeah. So I was reading Sam Black's article earlier, and I remember he said that this was, I think he said that essentially this used to draw a card by itself. So it was just an Elvish Visionary that also had the other text on it, and that it was overpowered, and he was just Yorianing it in an Enchantress deck, and like just looping a bunch of whatever. And I was like, oh, if you can do that with Serra Sanctum, because I keep thinking that if there is a card that cares about ETBs for enchantments or enchantments that have valuable ETBs, Serra Sanctum plus Yorion is just like waiting to happen. It just hasn't happened yet because I guess people don't really care about that type of deck. But
yeah,
I mean, if you can just spam a bunch of enchantments and then you just have an academy on the table to both draw and play your Yorion.
I mean, here's the thing: is in a situation where you want to play Yorion, you got to have those extra cards in your deck. So maybe you do want 8 through 12 enchantresses.
There's got to be something there, right? I mean, if you played Carpet of Flowers plus Dryad of the Elysian Grove, double your mana on the second main phase, and then just do a bunch of shenanigans, there's got to be something. There's got to be. There's just got to be. I can't be the only guy sitting in front of a veto background thinking that.
No, probably not. Probably
there's
not.
Got to be others, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well,
all right. Well,
Yorion Enchantress. You heard it here first.
Yep. All right. So let's talk. Let's talk next about Dauthi Voidwalker. Dauthi Voidwalker is a Dauthi rogue, 2 black mana for a 3/2 with Shadow. And if a card would be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, instead exile it with a void counter on it. And then you can tap and sacrifice Dauthi Voidwalker, choose an exiled card an opponent owns with a void counter on it, and you may play that card without paying its cost.
This card is so funny to me in that Shadow is just flavor text for unblockable. It's they just mean the same thing.
I mean, it just says that like if your opponent is also playing a Dauthi Voidwalker, then
you can block Voidwalkers. Yeah, cool. The Voidwalker meta. Mm-hmm. I mean, this card's obviously good, right? Like Magus of the Leyline of the Void plus additional text on a relevant beater. It's like, all right, unblockable 3/2, which means that it's going to be very good at like killing walkers or some shit. And then also, this is just like the same way that Valentin is a Seal of Uro. This is a Seal of Uro.
Yep. Yeah, this is it's a fine like creature by itself. Like I wouldn't say I would play a 2 black mana 3/2 unblockable in Legacy, but like by itself, it does get the beats in, you know.
There's the activated ability of sacrifice it, play your opponent's spell for free is good, and I feel like that's where you can really leverage this sort of thing. I mean, you could just like turn 1 Thoughtseize, take their best card or whatever, and then even if it's something like a Force of Will, you play this on 2. If you get to untap with it, you just have free counterspell on the table, right? Like,
yeah.
Or I'm sorry, I mean you can't do that line because it has to be on the table first. But you get what I'm saying. You can bind this card to like leverage the back end of this card, but also your opponent needs to play Magic, right? Like when you play this card, they can't not play things. So
yeah. I mean,
just a reminder for people who have when this interaction inevitably comes up for you. If you bolt this, the bolt will get exiled. If you abrupt decay this, the abrupt decay will not get exiled.
Wow. Okay. So I believe you. And I can't even think about how that works in my head.
The reason for that is fairly simple when you break it down. It's because when you bolt something, it puts the damage on that creature.
And then
the bolt goes to the yard. State-based effects will see that it has lethal damage on it, and then it will die. So sense. It's state-based check after the resolution of the bolt, where abrupt decay destroys the card as part like on resolution. So it's not on the table when they go to the yard. So it's like this weird interim thing, but that's how it works. It's why like if you bolt a Goyf, right, and there isn't an instant in the yard and it grows the Goyf, then you just wasted your bolt. It's exactly the same idea. So if you want to not have your bolt be exiled for whatever reason, just be aware of that.
Yep.
But this card's great. It's going to combo with shit like Helm the same way that Leyline does, right? Any of the shenanigans.
Jesus.
Yeah. Any of the shenanigans that you wanted to do where you have like a rest in peace on the table, this is going to do similar things.
You could play Voidwalker Energy Field. No,
Voidwalker
that will not work.
That won't work because Energy Field cares about your shit. Yeah.
Yeah.
If your opponent, however, has a Voidwalker,
slam the Energy Field.
You slam your Energy Field. Get wrecked, Voidwalker player.
And then he exiles one of your cards.
Oh, doesn't matter. Yeah, you gotta exile. Doesn't matter. You gotta play
Voidwalker and start
exile your Pyroblast.
Yeah. All right. So next up is Bloodbraid Marauder. Bloodbraid Marauder is a 1 and a red for a 3/1 human berserker, and it says it can't block. It has Delirium. This spell has Cascade as long as there are 4 more of the types. It's basically Delirium Cascade. What do you think about this card?
This card is not going to be in your play your one Cascade spell in your deck every time, all the time, always, because of the Delirium. So this is more in my mind of what I imagine Cascade decks were intended to be, where you're going to
like a value
Cascade
deck.
not really know what you're going to get. I think that you are, you don't want to play this with any other zeros other than whatever you want to Cascade into, right?
Yeah.
But you're going to have your Brainstorms and your Ponders that you're also going to Cascade into, which for what it's worth, a 3/1 that also ponders is totally fine.
Well,
right?
look, here's the way I look at this
good.
card. Is I don't know if Burn would ever want this card, but you could run one or two of these guys, and you've got instant, sorcery, land, and creature are probably in your graveyard, and you get a little bonus off of this guy for playing him. That's the only thing I could really think of with this, but just like popping a value in. If this card came back from the graveyard somehow, I think it would have more. It would more likely be good.
Between Force of Negation and Force of Will, for the same reason that the old Cascade decks with Shardless Agent worked, because you could work around not hitting anything that wouldn't play. Right. And then those decks, they were bug, and then they got Assassin's Trophy. And that also cleaned up their Cascades because it made it that they could always trophy and then hit a land. And they were just like cleaning up their Cascades. Right. I feel like if you just move away from bug and over into rug, then you can play Rug Cascade and be happy that you're just going to be a bunch of value things. The problem with that is I don't think the format, like maybe that would have been good 5 years ago. 6 years ago, but I don't think the format cares about your incremental.
Not in rug. Not in rug.
Wheels.
Yeah.
The downside though is you have a bunch of good suspend spells in those colors between Crash of Rhinos and
that's
Ancestral.
The thing.
You have those.
You got the new bribery that we'll talk about soon.
Right, you've got the new bribery. I mean, the problem with those Cascade spells, even the ones that you can suspend for 1, they're all suspend 4.
Yeah.
And it's like going down a card on your turn 1 to get paid off on turn 4. Your opponent might just have made up a relevant amount of cards or an equivalent amount of cards by the time you resolve your visions anyway, right?
Yeah.
If you go turn 1 suspend Ancestral and they go turn 1 Ragavan, it's like, all right, well, I mean, over the course of those turns, if that Ragavan connects 1 time, it'll draw 2 cards.
Yeah,
and it's like,
that's
well,
not great.
This wasn't great. I think this card is half a decade too late.
Yep. All right. So let's chat it up about Blossoming Calm. Blossoming Calm is, find out where I put my Blossoming Calm. Oh no. And I lost it somewhere in the shuffle there. Fudge. He said it. The F -- word. Let me find Blossoming Calm real fast.
I got it.
Type it in. Oh, you got it? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Go for it.
All right. Blossoming Calm is a 1-mana instant for white. It says you gain hexproof until your next turn. You gain 2 life, rebound.
So here's what I'm thinking about this card is, there it is. I found it finally. I'm thinking about this card is, this is 2 time walks against a Storm deck. If you know that they're going to try and go off against you, this gives you 2 turns to beat them if you're in that zone.
If you were playing against Storm, let's say you're putting this in your deck, your white deck, you're like, I need to put something in my deck to not die to Storm. I don't see why you would ever play this above Deafening Silence first.
Sure.
Now, that's not to say this doesn't work. You may say to yourself, I'm a white deck. I need specifically a hate card that can give me game against both stack-based combo and against burn.
Yeah, all right, and this is good against burn because it also gains you 2 life. So while they can't dome you, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, so they can't dome you while on your turn, so they can't cast sorceries. So there's not a ton of sorceries in burn. Lava Spike, Chain Lightning. But they can't cast those.
If you cast this in response to your opponent's Rift Bolt coming off suspend, I assume that you would scoop, as they should. Also, stop playing Burn.
Shout out to Eric Higby.
I don't think this card is quite good enough, but I would love to be proven wrong because the applications like we're talking about are there.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems like it's too weak because like if you're playing this card against a Storm opponent, let's say, or against a Burn opponent, I don't see where this card, like this card isn't lights out against them. Like if you're playing against Storm, the Storm pilot's going to be like, all right, I'll just make my land drops for the next 2 turns and then kill you when you don't have this thing.
Yeah, if I don't die, I got you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, or like you cast this and it does something similar to Veil of Summer against a discard spell, right? They cast a discard spell and then you hexproof yourself. They go down a card, you gain some life. I guess the gaining life also means that their tendrils needs to be 1 storm higher. But I feel like if the tendrils deck is killing you and you're playing I'm assuming Blossoming Calm would be in a more control-ish deck that would care about having a card like this that can interact on the stack and not something that's like trying to get you dead, like in a creature matchup where they can just play shit like Meddling Mage.
The problem with playing this
super fringe.
The problem with playing this in response to, say, a discard spell is this is probably the card that they would take out of your hand first too. Like, they're going to be like, I would have taken that with my Thoughtseize, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I like this card, but I think that the way that you really have to think of the payoff is like, okay, well, giving yourself hexproof against everything is good. There's a slight upgrade to that versus Veil of Summer, right? Because you can hexproof yourself from everything as opposed to just blue and black. So if your opponent's trying to dome you for whatever reason, like we're talking about against Burn, it's relevant. I think that the gain 2 life aspect of this card is what is actually going to make or break it. Because they're like, the rebound is good, but the rebound isn't something you control, right? You control the first get, and that's when you should really, leverage this card as a trick. But then the rebound is incoming, and that's just kind of going to silence those effects for a turn, not really trade for cards, right?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, Phil. You like to play Snapcaster Mage.
Dude, I do love me a Snapcaster Mage, and if you've heard me from episode 77 of this podcast all the way through to episode 199.2, part 2, I've always said Miracles just needs some incidental life gain that it can have in its deck that it can play. I think the issue with this card, though, is it doesn't seem main deckable, right? Like, if you have this card, it's just 1 mana gain for life on the rebound. If you're playing against something like D&T, right? Like, all right, well, I guess I do nothing then.
I mean, let's look real fast. What does like Goldfish say like the top 8 decks are real fast? Like, would you want it against those decks, right? Like, let's see real fast. Like,
when Blue-Red Delver is chaining you, when it's the lethal spell.
Yeah. Let's find out. What are the top 8 decks? Is it Delver, Teamer, Delver? So no on both of those ends. Is it Delver kind of?
No.
But like, you definitely don't want this against Teamer Delver.
You don't want it against either deck. You can't afford.
No, I'm saying if you main deck this, would you be upset? Right? Like, at least it's going to counter a Lightning Bolt against is it Delver? Teamer Delver probably is not.
It's going to counter a Lightning Bolt if they choose to turn their Lightning Bolt into a Lava Spike.
Of course, that's what I'm saying. Like, that. It's not good, but like, that's your best use of that card. So is it Delver? No. Teamer Delver? Definitely not.
The ceiling is you being dead on board and your opponent casting a lethal spell. And you're like,
Grixis Control.
Gotcha.
No.
And then they're like, all right, Sprite Dragon you.
Yeah. It's like Grixis Control, no. Hogak, no.
Grixis Control, yes.
What? Why?
Catch their Hindatorak.
Yeah, but that's fine. But do you want it main deck to stop a Hindatorak?
Oh! I thought you were just going through the decks for like where this would make sense.
I'm saying, like, would you be upset if you sat down against your opponent and this was in your main deck and you had it in your opener? Right.
I'm saying
I don't think you would.
In an open field, if you're looking at the meta, if the X% of the time, like you're saying, I'm going to sit down across the table from Grixis Control, which means that they're already handicapping themselves because they're not playing the Uro control deck.
Yeah.
Then I'm happy to have Blossoming Calm. But against the top tier decks of the format, which is every flavor of Delver, every flavor
Hogak,
of Uro.
Mono Green Cloud Post, Lands, Maverick, Elves, and Mono Red Prison. Burn's not even in the top of that. Death and Taxes is 10th.
You want to know what this card is reminding me of?
Yeah, no.
You know how there are some players in the world that just have way too many cards for Storm versus like its actual meta share? It's
will the real Zach Clark please stand up?
Good thing I'm playing against Storm because I have 14 sideboard cards.
And you don't even know what to take out, you know? Like, that's the worst part. Have a sideboard plan.
This card feels like if you would play this card thinking you're like, I'm not losing to burn today. And then you would still lose to burn even with this card in your deck.
All right. Well, let's go to the next card. And that card is Fury. Fury is the final in the cycle of pitch spells. So it is a 5-mana double strike 3/3. And when it enters the battlefield, deal 4 damage divided as you would choose to any number of target creatures and or planeswalkers. And its evoke is pitch a red card. So what do you think?
People are low on this card because I guess they think it's only going to fit for Modern in that it's just pyrokinesis, but it doesn't have...
As a sorcery, right? Yeah.
It's as a sorcery. And none of the decks that were playing pyrokinesis really care about having the 5-mana double striker.
Yeah, I mean, like Mono Red Prison would be would be the deck that would play this and like gain something from it because they could cast a 5-mana double striker. But like you're never going to see this come out of the sideboard for like Izzet Delver. Like you want those you want your pyrokinesis to be instant speed. You know, and I think that's the same situation with the Mono Red Prison deck. You want your pyrokinesis to be instant speed. You don't want to lose to your opponent's like Infect deck because you brought in a sorcery speed version of a card that you should have been playing instead.
Right.
You know, I think that's kind of I don't know. Do you have any more to say about this card? I don't have a ton. I don't have anything else to say about it.
I think if we were ranking the evoke creatures, Grief is playable in a subsection of decks. Solitude is playable in a subsection of decks. Endurance, I'm guessing, is probably going to be the best one. And then Fury and Subtlety. The blue one are going to just never see play in Legacy.
I agree.
I think in Modern, this will see play because Elves got a huge boon, and this is relevant against those kinds of decks. But in this format where you have pyrokinesis, that's just going to be the better option. I
agree. All right, let's go to Echoing Return. This is a 1-mana sorcery that says return target creature and all other creatures with the same name as that card from your graveyard to your hand. I specifically added this because someone on the Reddit page mentioned it, and they were wondering about how this would work maybe for faster starts with lands and stuff. I didn't understand the comment completely, but like as a value card, maybe I don't see it personally speaking, but I wanted to mention this lands card. Yeah, that's what it said. I don't see any reason to play this card.
What creature? I don't even know.
I'll go to the.
No. You don't have to look it up. I believe you.
I want to make sure I'm not crazy. Is all.
I'm not trying to mod the Reddit threads, but I don't see what is the world where you even have 2 of the same creature reliably in your graveyard to make this more than a Disentomb.
Yeah, I think as a raised dead, it's a strictly better raised dead, but is that where you want to be?
Well, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, you could Buried Alive, but I assume if you are buried aliving, you want those things that you buried alive in your graveyard. Yeah.
So I did not see Echoing Return on the list, and I was wondering if it will change up Turbo DD, Dark Depth piles, Wraith, Echoing Return, LED, Oracle, at all by making room for a bit more of a toolbox to enable faster starts.
Oh, for Doomsday.
Yeah. Turbo Doomsday. I was saying Dark Depths. That's a huge difference. And they're not wrong. That makes a little bit of sense, actually.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Turbo Doomsday, my issue with the Turbo Doomsday decks are it assumes that you have the life to spend. And given that Doomsday, if you're turboing and you're at a high enough life total, let's say you Doomsday on turn 2 and it resolves, right? Let's say you fetched once. Well, you're already down to 9. So if your opponent does anything, it's really tough to be like, all right, I'm going to street race 4 times to clear my deck.
Yeah.
Right. Because then you're like, all right, well, now I'm dead to every burn spell, and I can't interact.
Including Gunshot, which is going to be played more.
Which is going to be played more. That seems a little iffy. I don't see a world where this card ever sees play.
Fair enough. No, but I'm glad that you corrected me on the Dark Depths versus Doomsday. I was like thinking it was a totally different thing.
If they printed a Squadron Hawk that said when this ETBs entomb up to 3 copies of itself from your deck, and then you're like, now it's got to do something better than Squadron Hawk, because Squadron Hawk would just put it in your hand anyway.
Yeah.
So this would have to be a thing like, I would have to have some other bit of value, but it would have to have that kind of effect, which is essentially you're tutoring for tutors.
Yeah.
And then you get to be like, every time I think of spinning my wheels like that now, you know what I think of? What? Marcus sent me a GIF in our chat talking about trying to figure out how to make miracles good. And we were talking about the new profane tutor. And we were like, oh yeah, you could tutor to get the tutor, and then you could tutor. And we were just talking about tutor loops that if everything is going right, you can tutor for everything, and your opponent's just not interacting with all this. And I was like, yeah, that's the kind of magic I want to play, is just tutor for my tutors to ultimately do nothing. And then he sends me a GIF of Jerry Seinfeld with a scar in his mouth going like this. And I'm like, that's what I think of. Your listeners at home, just imagine I look like Jerry Seinfeld and I'm an idiot. That's what I imagine every time now when I hear like, well, if you do this cool thing, then this card could work to get you nothing.
It's a deck. It's a deck about nothing.
It's a thing that does. So you're making me think of a time where I was playing Vintage back when Fast Bond was just unbanned, unrestricted. And everybody was like, oh yeah, this was like the 14 land, 4 Gush Lotus Cobra deck, right?
Sure. Of course.
And I played it. I didn't know what was going on really. I was just like hanging out with people, and they were like, here, try this deck. It seems like it's right up your alley. I was like, cool. So I play the deck. I have Fast Bond. I have Gush. I have the Lotus Cobra. I'm picking up my lands. I'm playing my lands. I'm making the mana. I'm drawing the cards. You know what I did? I goldfished for like 6 minutes and then passed the turn with a lower life total and a Lotus Cobra on the table.
Yeah, of course.
That's what I did. Now, let me tell you, I had the best time, but I didn't win that game.
No.
That's what this feels like. You're gonna spin all the wheels and then still lose.
All right. Yeah, I agree. All right. So Echoing Return, we'll pass for now. We'll see what happens. We knew it had to happen. Inevitable Betrayal. Inevitable Betrayal is a 0 mana sorcery with suspend 3, and it costs 1 and 2 blue to suspend. And it says it reads bribery. Search your opponent's deck for a creature and put that creature onto the battlefield, then shuffle.
Unplayable.
You think unplayable? I was wondering if it could be like a value card for a Cascade deck, or like a sideboard card for like for Bug Shardless Agent style decks.
There is a card right against the type of decks that would have a creature that you want to get. Right? Name the creatures in the format that you would want to bribe.
I mean, I would take an Emrakul. I would take a Grizzlebrand.
If you're playing an Emrakul, let's say you're playing Emrakul, and you're not just playing 5 mana bribery so you can get it immediately, right?
Yeah.
You're like, all right, I'm going to suspend this for 3 mana. I'm going to take my turn 3 off. I'm going to suspend this. I'm going to assume I haven't been shown and told. And then this is going to resolve 2 turns from now. And then I'm going to take your Emrakul. I'm going to put it into play. I'm going to win the game. There's the blue sorcery that says your opponent mills cards until they reveal a creature. Put that creature into play on your side.
I know. Telemann Performance.
Telemann Performance. Well done. Well done. 50 points to Zach Clark.
House Atreides.
Dirtle Magus right there. So that card was played briefly in the Storm sideboards where they would just make 5 mana, cast that thing, get an Emrakul into play, or get a Grizzlebrand into play, and call it a day. That has fallen by the wayside because obviously it's not good, and it's specifically for only that matchup.
Yep.
This one requires 3 mana, and then you don't get the payoff until turn 5. And then even if you do get the payoff, it's not guaranteed to win you the game. That's
here's where I'm going with this card. Here's what I'm thinking, right? Like you've got these other suspend spells that are playable, but like not great. You know, your profane tutor card, stuff like that. So you can slot those cards into you can slot this into a one of with cards like that, and possibly play a value game where you get to know, okay, yeah, my opponent's playing this. I got my one of card. I put that on top with brainstorm and then cast it. And that's the only thing I'm thinking of is like this is like a role player value card in a possible like Shardless Bug style deck that maybe it's only even in the sideboard as a one of. I don't think this is like, oh, we need to be playing this. I bring this card up because I think that these cards that are like corner case fringe playable cards, we need to mention them at the very least to say whether to determine whether or not you should be looking to buy these cards if you're playing those decks or not too.
I am going to assume the position that you shouldn't buy this one.
Fair.
However,
it's super cheap. I bet it's probably like $5 or less, right?
Well, bribery is pretty expensive because of EDH, right? So
yes.
I imagine that maybe this is a world where people want 2 briberies in their decks. But for constructed purposes, I think if I am tasked with finding the Serra Sanctum Yorion deck, that you are tasked with finding the make this bribery suspend card even remotely good.
All right, I'm on it.
My guess is that you're going to play this main deck and you're maybe going to steal a Ethereal Forger.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about Magus of the Bridge. It took me a second to remember what this card did just off the top of my head because I was like, there's an ensnaring bridge Magus? But no, there's not. It's a bridge from below Magus for 3 black mana. It's a 4/4 for 3 black mana, so it's got that going for it. And whenever a non-token creature is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, create a 2/2 black zombie creature. Whenever a creature is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, an opponent's graveyard from the battlefield, exile Magus of the Bridge.
So I guess this might be sort of relevant for Modern because they banned Bridge in that format.
True.
So if you want that, the thing is that 3 black...
3 black is a lot.
3 black is really hard in that format. Also... I think it's the coolest part about this card is finally Bridge from Below makes sense on the table as opposed to in the graveyard.
Man, Bridge from Below is one of those cards as a kid that like I opened as a kid, as like a 25-year-old. And I opened and was like, why does this card exist? Get it out of here.
Right, because you were like, I don't understand why does it even have a casting cost.
Yeah, I don't have time for this.
It's funny how it was a card that did absolutely nothing on the table. Yeah, it's like
it had a casting cost.
If I cast this and then blow it up, then I get the advantage, or you could just discard it.
Yeah,
this card is not going to see play anywhere. I mean, it being a 4/4 would make sense if it had any type of additional vanilla stat on it. Reach. I mean, which would be weird because it's from below.
Reach. How about doesn't exile when an opponent loses a creature from blocking?
If this had shadow, if they just kill their own creature, this thing exiles itself. It's just not going to see play. I think it's just an homage.
All right, yeah, it's fine. Let's go to Murktide Regent. Murktide Regent is a 7 mana that's 5 and 2 blue dragon 3/3 delve flying. And whenever it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on it for each instant and sorcery exiled with it. Whenever an instant or sorcery leaves your graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on Murktide Regent.
So it's the blue Tombstalker.
The blue Tombstalker. So you're probably going to get at least a 5/5 out of this, right?
Yeah, if you're exiling 5 cards, it's probably some combination of instant sorceries and lands.
Yep.
The difference here, though, is it has the additional clause to get bigger by exiling other cards. What that makes me think of is any cards that have flashback. If you flash something back from your yard, it will exile and also pump this thing. I don't really think you're in a world where that's going to matter all that much. But there will be potentially corner cases where you have this thing and...
Or you cast another one of these things and the other one becomes like a 12/12.
The other one gets huge. Yeah. I mean, if you're in that type of space and have the time to do that, then you're probably winning anyway. This thing I think is just a blue Tombstalker. It's probably going to be in the world of a 2-mana 5/5 to 6/6. The downside about it, I think, though, is if you can play Tombstalker and want that effect, you're probably better off playing Tombstalker. If you're not in black and you want this effect, it's probably competing with Ethereal Forager.
Yeah.
I think the meta
or Bedlam Reveler.
Or Bedlam Reveler. I think that the issue with this card, though, is that it just gets hit by Pyroblast and you don't care, right?
Yep. Yeah, that was the problem with Cryptic Serpent or Cryptic Snake, whatever. Yeah. And that one didn't have flying, but like you wanted to play it, you were like, "Oh, this is good. I could play this." And it had the pseudo delve, but like everyone's playing Pyroblast. This card, it just gets hit by like you did all that work. And now you're in your rug deck and you delved all that stuff. And now what happens? You have you can't cast your Hooting Mandrills afterwards. There's so many problems. Like your Nimble Mongoose don't work. Yeah, I'm a hard pass on this card. All right, let's check out Soothing Rest. Target player shuffles their graveyard into the library, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. We're going to cut a lot of that, I hope. All right. So it's called Blessed Respite, and it says target player shuffles their graveyard into their library, prevent all damage that would be dealt this turn. What do you think?
Can you pronounce it respite and respite?
Respite, respite.
Does it go either way?
I don't know.
I like to whenever I see a card like this, I like to read blessed as 2 words. Blessed respite. Blessed respite. So I think the coolest part about this card, or anytime there's a card that just says shuffle your graveyard into your library, I love it. It just makes me nostalgic for Sphinx's Rev Elixir of Immortality type decks, where the goal of the deck is just to not die. Yeah. And then eventually you win because you go infinite and your opponent decks naturally.
Literally dirtle them to death.
That for some reason, that type of gameplay is just so perfect to me. I just love the idea of that. It just hits home for some reason. So I love these effects. I just wish they weren't always in green.
Yeah.
They're just always in green. And it makes sense, right? It's part of green's pie, but
that's what green
always
does.
in green.
Yeah.
I'm like, give me the one. Like there are some in blue, right? But the ones that are in blue are unplayable. There's the 4-mana instant, draw a card, shuffle your graveyard back in. There's the 3-mana sorcery, draw a card, shuffle your graveyard back in. All unplayable, right?
There's the 5-mana one that like exile, like that mills your opponent for your graveyard.
Oh, psychic
vortex? Psychic
puppetry. Psychic puppetry is definitely not playable. That's a combo card. But I would love it if there was just like a cheap miracles sort of thing that shuffles my graveyard back in and is good enough to make me not play Mystic Sanctuary, that I could have the Sphinx's Elixir aesthetic in Legacy and have it be playable. But I think that's a fever dream. This card's not playable.
All right, so let's talk about Break the Ice. Break the Ice is
not playable.
You don't think it's playable? 2-mana sorcery?
Close. Not even close.
No.
Dude, you have Sinkhole already.
Sinkhole exists, yeah.
Sinkhole does everything this card does, and you're never getting to 6 mana anyway.
It's true.
If you get to 6 mana, overloading this is not going to do any more damage than just casting it would have.
It's true. All right, so we can pass on Break the Ice. Let's talk about my favorite card we're going to talk about today, Tavern Scoundrel.
Dude, you want to know why this combo is not going to work?
Because
I'm going to tell you, and it's because I walk into this trap every single time. And this set, I'm learning a lot about myself from this set, right? I'm not making the same mistake that I did with Dreadhorde Arcanist when it comes to like Ragavan, right? I'm not looking at Tavern Scoundrel and being like, oh, Tavern Scoundrel, if I play another unplayable, gives me infinite mana. And then with that infinite mana, I need a third card to do something that is game ending. I fell into that trap when Kinnan Bonder Prodigy was spoiled. I was like, too easy. We're going to play Kinnan. We're going to play Basalt Monolith. Infinite mana. Then what? Doesn't matter. You have infinite mana. You can do anything. Turns out that third card matters when you're playing two unplayables. You're like, I'm going to play multiple copies of two different kinds of unplayables in my deck to hopefully like cast Emrakul. And it's just like, okay, so that means you're going to have hands. You're going to have hands where you're going to have Tavern Scoundrel and Emrakul and nothing to do with either of them. And you're going to be like, I should have known. I should have known. And then everybody's like, oh no, the Efreet, dude. The Efreet, you just put 1,000 triggers on the stack to flip a coin for free, make infinite mana, and we got to get the Efreet because it's on the reserve list. It's going to spike. I'm saving you.
I have 4 Efreets.
Zach, you look at me right now. I'm saving you.
No way, man. I'm going human rogue.
Do it.
Efreet beat down.
Dude,
if it happens.
I now when you play this deck and just lose because somebody fucking dazes you, you're just gonna be sitting there and you're gonna be
I have infinite mana. You can't daze me.
You're gonna be hearing me going, geez, Phil was right. I just really wanted to play these Efreets and these Tavern Scoundrels. At least I have this 1/3 to block the Ragavan.
Yep. All right. Yeah, see, I mean there you go. I can block Ragavan with him. All right. So the final card that I can think of off of this is Resurgent Belief, which got spoiled just yesterday. And that is another 0 mana suspend card with suspend 2 for 1 and a white. It has suspend 2, and it reads replenish.
Yeah, so Nate's idea of playing this on 2, and in the interim, you just play a bunch of entombs and then get a shit ton of value. The thing that I find difficult with decks like that is, are you not just better putting Grizzlebrand into your yard?
Yeah, I mean, there's that. I think that this card, if anything, it's going to be like another card that Enchantress can play. Like, I think that's fine. Like,
that's interesting.
It just can be like a card Enchantress is like, well, if you try and blow me out with Tranquility, I just have this happening in 2 turns, you know?
I mean, every single time this happens, the card that comes up is As Foretold, right? And As Foretold only lets you cast 1 spell free per turn, right? Like based on like however many counters it has, you can cast your free spells.
Yeah.
But it only lets you do that once per turn. So in the Replenish deck that sort of sees Fringy play, it's just a bunch of the cycling enchantments that then have big effects, right? Like Steal a Permanent or whatever, or Shark Typhoon. And then when that thing's on the table, it's obviously ridiculous. So you're probably in the similar space, so you can play but you can actually have As Foretold now in your deck as well, and sort of lower the curve. That way you don't have to play, A, you don't have to buy replenishes, B, you don't have to tap out for 4 mana. You can just play this and have it be fine.
I think that's the reason why this card's we're talking about too, is because you like Replenish just gets blown out by days. Like you're just like, I'll tap 4 mana, your opponent's like, boop. This card, you're untapped when it goes off. You know, that's slightly better. And by slightly, I mean like it's a margin better than Replenish for that reason.
So the tough part about this card is I think it might be better than Replenish in a lot of spots, right?
Sure.
Specifically, if you have As Foretold, it's obviously better, right? Because it's just cheaper. But that means it's a combination, right? You're assembling cards. The other side of it, though, is if you are playing a bunch of the cycling cards, right? Let's say you have the time to do that, right? Mm-hmm. If you are cycling on turn 1 or trading on turn 1, and then you play this on turn 2, so it'll come off on 4, and you spend your turn 3 cycling enchantments into the yard or dumping them somehow. Then when this comes off on 4, you can bring those enchantments back. I feel like in the interim, it's also going to compel your opponent to have to like spend their cantrips to have cards to fight over the Replenish coming off the stack.
Yeah.
So in that way, it may be more compelling because it's going to change your opponent's behavior, as opposed to you just slamming a 4-drop and hoping it wins the game, as most 4-drops should. So this is one of those cards where if it shows up as the like Replenish deck and revitalizes it, like changes up how it's played and like lowers it to the ground, I wouldn't be surprised. But I don't think it's going to make it any better than the deck currently is.
I think it will be again. This is a fringe deck that may see some play. I think it'll be better than it is just because it doesn't die to daze, which is basically played in all of the top tier decks. So I think it's got that going for it. But all those decks also have sideboard issues. Like to deal with things in your graveyard. So I don't think that's a deck you want to be playing. If you have that, you're going to have fun at a tournament. Sure, play the replenish deck. But I think that getting blown out by like Back to Nature or Harmonic Convergence.
I mean, nobody's playing Back to Nature, but if a deck like this ever does pick up, you can never actually expect to win more than one event with it because people would just be like, "Oh, I'll just play Back to Nature and blow that deck out."
Yep.
It's very Dredgian in that way.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's it. That's it for everything that we had for this set. We went over all the cards. I can't believe we went over all the cards.
So Urza's Saga is still probably one of the biggest slam dunks too. I get that was super spoiled early on, so it's kind of lost its moxie because Ragavan has kind of taken over that space of being excited about stuff. I mean, the set is just loaded with bangers. And
what's your favorite card of the set is what, Ragavan or Urza's Saga?
I think Ragavan. Hold on. Sorry, my thing has stopped recording.
That's okay. We can keep going. I'm recording both sides.
Yeah, cool. I'm back. I think Ragavan is the card that is going to take the most space because it's just going to be warping the best. It's going to be making the best deck better. But I think Urza Saga is going to help out lands. It's going to help out Urza Echo. It's going to help out, like, the other decks have a different axis to fight on, and I think that's going to be very good. So I would put that in the A tier if I were ranking the set with Ragavan. Ragavan, I think is the best card in the set. But
I think for me, I think you're going to see the most play out of Resurgent Belief, man. That's my guess.
Resurgent is not going to see the most
after Ragavan. I think Ragavan is just an obvious slot into every deck that can play it. But I think that for the way I like to play Magic, I think Resurgent Belief is going to see more play than most of the other cards, and I also like it the most.
Yeah, I mean, Resurgent Belief is going to see play. It's not going to see as much play, but it's also because there's less decks that want ports than there are decks that want
to draw cards to
make
mana.
to draw cards and make mana, or decks that are like, I want a land that can produce threats underneath my opponent's counter magic.
Yeah. All right. Well, time will tell. I think that wraps it up for us this week. As always, you can check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/EternalDurdles. That helps us continue making the show in a timely fashion. Allows us to set aside some time for it and whatnot. I want to thank our current Patreons as well. And they gave us some really great responses on the Discord. You can join us on the Discord as well. I think that's up as a public option on our Patreon. So
a very happy Asmorna Martica Dystina Coldakar Day to all of our patrons. Let's just
yes, Asmorna Martica Dystina Coldakar to each and every one of you.
To each of you, thank you. Asmorna Martica Dystina Coldakar to you.
Bless us, everyone.
Dystina Coldakar to you.
All right. Well, I think that's it for us. Have a great night, and that's it. Bye.